And I'm now joined by Lennart Gans, part of the German editorial team at Transfermarkt and a Werder Bremen expert. Before we start talking about Victor Boniface, Lennart, how are you feeling about Werder at the moment? 6 points with 2 games to go is the gap to the relegation zone. How confident are you feeling that this is a done deal for you guys and you can celebrate the 2026-2027 Bundesliga season?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm kind of confident, like as you said, 6 points ahead of the relegation zone, and on top, Wolfsburg and St. Pauli have a direct matchup on the last match day. So and they play Bayern and Leipzig next weekend. So I think even if we lose both games, we can plan with Bundesliga football next season. I'm quite sure about that.
But the big question then is when you think about Werder Bremen and starting to plan Bundesliga football for next season, is Victor Boniface going to be part of those plans? I mean, he is you're already shaking your head. He's unknown from Bayer Leverkusen, of course. Didn't quite work out for him. I mean, your immediate reaction is no. He suffered that really terrible injury into his loan, hardly featured for Werder Bremen this season, right? Just the 11 games, 2 assists, 326 minutes. It's been not a great stint for him at Werder.
Yeah, he came in with a very, very high expectations. Like he was a deadline day signing, and every Werder fan was quite hyped after he was signed. Like he just failed his medical at Milan, so that was the type of club you expected him to move, and then he fell through, and ended up going to Werder. He was the most valuable signing in club history, which is a pretty big thing. And yeah, we really had high expectations, but as you said, he had to deal with a lot of injuries and couldn't really live up to the expectations. For next season, I mean, he's just on loan, so he will go back to Bayer Leverkusen in summer. And I'm quite sure there's no chance that Werder will try again because there's not really much a reason to do so.
Yeah, I mean, the injury history is well documented, isn't it? Started already at Leverkusen, and then at Werder Bremen, he has missed 17 games with the cartilage damage in his knee, but then, of course, fitness issues and a cold. You mentioned the market value. I mean, when Leverkusen signed him for Union Saint-Gilloise in 2023, his market value quickly exploded to 40 million euros. It went then to 45 million euros. And then it dropped. It started dropping with the loan to Werder Bremen. He was still at 40 million euros when he joined. I mean, before we get to the really dramatic drop to the 5 million euros that he is at now, which is his lowest point when I look at his history since 2022, he has a really interesting market value graph, by the way. It goes up and it goes straight back down, and he's still young enough that it could go back up, only 25. But I remember in December 2025, so last year, there was these talks about him possibly going to Saudi Arabia, and the transfer fee that was discussed then was 70 million euros. Didn't happen. Played the second half of the season then with Bayer Leverkusen because Al-Nassr ended up signing Jean Duran. The Saudi clubs like to do this. They approach several clubs at the same time. They have one transfer fee in mind, and then they get the preferred target over the line. A really big hit for Leverkusen, right? Because it was a big transfer fee that they missed out on. But as you mentioned, Milan fell then through next. That was, I think, 20 million euros at the time that they were hoping for.
It was a loan with a buy option of 25, I think, and a loan fee of 5. So the total package was around 30 million. So way higher than they would get this summer, I think. Yeah.
And so that already less. And then the Werder Bremen loan was essentially free.
Yeah. I mean, it was to be expected that his market value will drop after the loan to Werder because just Werder is not such a big club as Milan and Bayer Leverkusen, obviously. They were a mid-tier Bundesliga club for like the last 10, 15 years. They even got relegated. So every time you switch the clubs to a smaller club, you're expected to lose market value. So that was quite obvious. But then obviously his poor form and his injury problems, didn't really help. And that he's at 5 million now is quite a statement because, as you said, just 18 months ago, we talked about 70 million euros, and now he's at 5, so it's quite disastrous time for him.
Do you think that, I mean, the injury concerns, it's not just the injury, there's also the video that he took himself racing on the Autobahn, right? I mean, there is lots of stuff going on in the background. Do you think back when Werder Bremen decided on this, also add to the fact that he failed his medical at Milan, do you think that Werder Bremen just didn't see the risk that was involved in this transfer?
Yeah, you could definitely say so. I mean, there were a high risk, but on the other side, every time you have the opportunity to get such a high quality player as I said, mid-tier Bundesliga club, you kind of have to take the chance, I think, especially on a deadline day where everything is very quick and you have to decide in minutes. And then when you get the chance and you hear from another club that this player is available, then I think there's no other chance than signing him. But what I also had, what I also wanted to say is that, as you said, his not only his fitness problems were a thing, but also his his mindset. Like every time he came back from an injury, you not only had the feeling that he was not fit, but also that his body looked out of shape and everything. And that's kind of a thing that also played a big part in his market value development, because you don't really have injuries can happen, but you don't really have the feeling that he can bounce back from an injury, because he looked so out of shape on the field that it's quite not. So nobody believes that he will find his form from 2023. It's quite not the best look for him right now.
What did Werder Bremen do anything to try to get him back on track? Because I mean, it's not an easy thing to convince a player that, hey, look, maybe you need to hit the gym every once in a while, or maybe you need to change your lifestyle away from the pitch. What did Werder Bremen try to do to maybe get this guy back on course?
I mean, at the beginning, it looked quite promising, to be honest. Like in his first game, he got subbed in and immediately gave an assist at a 4-0 win against Borussia Mönchengladbach. I remember that game because it was his first game. We won, and you really thought, okay, that's the beginning of a new era, and Boniface will be back in shape. But after that, he gave some interviews and he looked like he would try everything possible to get back to his form. But I think, then he suffered some minor setbacks and didn't really bounce back from those. So he just lost focus, I think, after those smaller injuries. And then he obviously suffered that big injury, and from that point on, he never really came back.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing. I mean, when he suffered this cartilage damage in December, that a lot of people thought that was it, right? He would just go back to Leverkusen. He wouldn't even play for Werder, but he's actually made the bench against Stuttgart. Didn't make the bench against Augsburg, but did make a bench against Stuttgart on match day 31. Did not feature at all on match day 32. Do you think we're gonna see him one more time in a Werder Bremen jersey?
I don't really think so. No, I mean, he was on the bench, but that was also due to some other injury problems in the squad. Our coach Daniel Thune even said that it doesn't really matter if he has 3 or 5 kilograms more on his body, because he can still score a header. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So he kind of talked himself into reasons to put him on the bench. But I don't really think. I mean, every time you see him on the training ground, he doesn't really look fit. And as soon as we have 18 available players besides Boniface, he will not make the squad again.
Yeah, I mean, that is the big question now, is what comes next, right? You look at his all-time stats on our site, the Transfermarkt. He scored 17 goals and 11 assists for Union Saint-Gilloise in 51 games. Before that, at Bodo Glimt, he scored 23 goals and 7 assists in 66 games. At Leverkusen, 32 goals and 12 assists in 61 games. It isn't like,
player he was.
I mean, that's the remarkable thing. This was legitimately a really, really good player. He's one of the best players in German football, and his his drop-off in performance and the injuries, of course, have been so remarkable. If you look ahead, do you ever think we're going to see that Victor Boniface again?
I mean, it's tough to tell because he's not that old. I mean, he's 25 years old. Yeah, he's 25 years old. So you would think he has enough time to come back from that. But I mean, his striker partner at Leverkusen is a very good example. Patrick Schick. He also has to deal with a lot of injuries. They both played a key part in the championship season 2023. And as I said, they both have injury problems. But Patrick Schick scored a hat-trick last weekend, and he's back. You know he has those problems, but you also have the feeling he can work out of those. And as I said, you don't really have that feeling from Boniface. I don't know what the background is, like if he has like mental issues or if he has some other stuff to deal with. I don't know, and it's tough to tell from the outside. But yeah, that's I think the main reason why it doesn't really seem like he could be back in that form anytime soon.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see what Leverkusen are going to do with him, because he's going to go back. And just looking at his profile now, he's under a contract there until 2028. You know, there's definitely interest on their part to at least get something for him, right? Because they made a significant investment themselves when they originally signed him, 22.6 million, and they were hoping that they would be able to sell him with a profit, and it does not look like that at all.
I mean, Saudi Arabia probably still has an eye on him. I don't know, because the name alone probably is reason enough for some Saudi club to pay enough for Leverkusen to say yes, I assume. But I don't think, as you said, the setback it was winter 2024, I think, that where he should go to Al-Nassr, and then they signed John Duran. Yeah, that was, I mean, the chance to sell him for Leverkusen, and that they missed out on that much money really will hurt them and their chances on the transfer market in the next years for sure.
It's an absolutely fascinating rise and fall of a player. I don't think, as I said, his market value curve, which you can find on every player's profile, is quite remarkable. I don't think I've seen a steep rise and steep drop off at many different players. Lennart, this was great. Thank you so much for coming on the rise and fall of Victor Boniface.
Thanks
we'll
for
see
having me.
What happens next.
And one funny thing, it's not the only story about Werder Bremen, because we also had Naby Keita a few years ago, which had kind of a similar story. He came to Werder as a big name, and he made even less games than Boniface and fell off even more quickly. So it's kind of a Werder Bremen thing.
He went to Turkey, right? If I remember, Naby Keita. Budapest.
Ferencváros Budapest he's playing
now.
That's
right. Yeah.
But it's a kind of a similar story. So I hope we don't buy another big name next summer.
Werder Bremen. Beware of big name signings.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Manuel.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks for coming on.